First of all, major props to Jake Paul. He went in there and he got the victory, and he went through hell and back to get it in the faces of all of his detractors, including myself. And I know there's going to be some excuses made for Silva, but there really should not be. And secondly,
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
This feels like I'm 10 years old and I just got a puppy for Christmas a couple of months ago, and I do everything with him. He's my best friend, he's my pal, I love him to death, and then somebody just comes along and... Growing up, Anderson Silva had an aura of complete invincibility about him. You couldn't even picture him being hurt, let alone beat. And watching him get pieced up tonight by a guy with 2.5 to 3 years of boxing training just lets me know that whatever I thought about MMA fighters and boxing is just completely false. It was all an illusion. MMA fighters don't know how to box in general. And that's totally fine. It's a different sport with a completely different skill set that at one point I thought transferred over pretty well to the boxing ring, but it clearly does not. So let's just stop calling out these boxers MMA fighters, because what are you getting out of this? You're getting a payday, but it's not the biggest payday you'll ever see, and you're completely devaluing yourself, and you're devaluing the sport of mixed martial arts. Like Eddie Hearn said, this is great for boxing, but it's absolutely horrible for MMA. The MMA fighter is always losing out, and I wish they could see the big picture past a quick cash grab. Like Tyron Woodley, the man tanked his whole brand for a couple of $1 million. Who's gonna want to hear fighting expert Tyron Woodley on TMZ now that he got knocked out by Jake Paul? Who's gonna want to hear his raps about beating your ass now that he got knocked out by Jake Paul? Nobody. And I guarantee you the next fight Anderson Silva books is going to have a lot less interest thanks to this fight with Jake Paul than it otherwise would have. But whatever, I'm not the fighter. I don't know where they're coming from financially, how bad it really is for them. So I'm not going to sit here and talk down on them or anything like that, because the truth is I really don't know. I'm just a fan, and I'm telling you what I would like to see happen as a fan. But I realize that there's too much money at stake for this bullshit to ever stop. So I guess we're going to see more Jake Paul against MMA fighter fights. So let's talk about the fight itself. Jake Paul fought really well. He boxed amazingly. He looked like a real boxer. He looked much better than he did in his previous fights, and he also looked much bigger and stronger. It looks like he bulked up by about 15 to 20 pounds for the Silva fight. Silva, on the other hand, fought exactly how he fought previously in MMA. He is a counter striker, so he tries to taunt you, to bait you to throw, and then he counter punches. Except Jake Paul's head movement was too good for him, and he couldn't catch him ever, pretty much. And Jake actually ended up catching him in round 8 and dropping him. And I know there's going to be a million people throwing out a million excuses for Silva, all having to do with his age. Oh, he was 47. He's a 47-year-old. He's almost 50. You can't just pick on a 47-year-old. So if we're going to go that route, let's make excuses for Jake Paul. Silva's 47. Okay, well, Jake Paul started training when he was 22, which is about 2.5 years ago, right? Imagine what would happen if he was training since he was 10. He would have finished Silva in 1 round. He's also smaller than Anderson Silva, and he had to bulk up for this fight to make the size difference less noticeable. He also doesn't have the natural athletic gifts that Anderson Silva has. He doesn't have his reflexes, he doesn't have his speed. So from where I'm standing, if we're going to use the he's 47 excuse, we can use all those excuses for Jake Paul, and it's pretty much an even fighting field, and Jake Paul won fair and square. One more thing I want to address is Jake Paul's whole savior of MMA, fighting union type of thing that he's trying to get going. I'm all for a fighters union, but I don't want Jake Paul involved, because it's almost like it makes me uncomfortable to support that, because he's absolutely sunning these legends that I grew up watching, right? He's beating their ass, he's talking shit to them before the fight, and then he's grabbing them, hugging them, patting them on the head and going like, hey, little buddy, Big Jake will take care of you, Big Jake will get you some money. Like, it's just, it's hard to watch. MMA is such a young sport, and it's in such a growing stage right now that I guess it's pretty easy to exploit for money. And hopefully in 10, 20 years, we can all just sit back and laugh about all this stuff. Like, remember what happened in the early days of the UFC, this type of fuckery. Hopefully this doesn't become a thing. I'm rambling. Anyway, congrats to Jake Paul once again. The man had all the cards stacked against him. Every metric possible except for age Silva had against him, and Jake Paul came out on top. And I guess we can just call him a real boxer now. He is the man in that sense. He works hard and he gets it done, and he clearly has a decent amount of ability. and he is better than most MMA fighters, I'm sorry to say. And with that said, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm sure not everybody's going to agree with me, which is fine. This is what this channel is for some nice and healthy discussion. And like, subscribe, unsubscribe. I'll see you soon.